On May 22, 2010, a programmer in Jacksonville, Florida, named Laszlo Hanyecz got hungry. He'd been posting on an obscure internet forum for days, offering a trade. 10,000 units of a digital currency almost nobody had heard of in exchange for 2 pizzas, not fancy pizzas. He specifically said he'd take leftovers. A 19-year-old student in California finally took the deal. He ordered 2 large pizzas from Papa John's, spent about $25, and collected his 10,000 bitcoins. At Bitcoin's peak, those 2 pizzas were worth over $690 million. Depending on the day you check the price now, the number floats somewhere around $1 billion. That's not the most expensive pizza ever sold. That's the most expensive meal in the recorded history of the human species. More than any royal banquet. More than any state dinner. 2 large pizzas, one of them with extra toppings, eaten by a guy in his kitchen who, by his own account, thought it was a pretty good deal at the time. And here's the part that actually breaks my brain. He wasn't wrong. The pizza was good. He said so. Think about that for a second. The single most valuable food transaction ever recorded involved the cheapest, most ordinary dish on the planet. A dish invented by people so poor that respectable society refused to touch it. A dish one famous American called sewage. A dish that would go on to topple a queen's reputation, fund a heroin empire, star in Cold War propaganda, and quietly beat Google on the stock market. If you like stories where the boring thing in your fridge turns out to have a body count, subscribing takes about 1 second, and it genuinely helps this channel keep making them. Okay, back to the pizza, because the question at the center of all this is simple to ask and weirdly hard to answer. How did the food of the poorest people in Europe, a food that doctors warned against and tourists mocked, become a $150 billion global industry? Who decided it was valuable? And why did so many people, from Neapolitan street vendors to American billionaires to a Soviet head of state, stake their fortunes and their reputations on flatbread with sauce? To answer that, we have to go back, way back, before the tomato even existed in Europe. People have been putting things on flatbread for as long as there have been ovens. Egyptian workers ate flatbreads with toppings. Persian soldiers under Darius the Great supposedly baked bread on their shields and covered it with cheese and dates, which is either an ancient pizza or a war crime against dough, depending on your standards. The Greeks had plakous, a flat cake with oil and herbs. Virgil's Aeneid even has a scene where Aeneas and his men are so hungry they eat the bread they were using as plates, fulfilling a prophecy that they'd one day eat their tables. Some food historians point to that as literature's first pizza moment. It's a stretch, but it's a fun stretch. The word itself shows up much earlier than you'd think. The first documented use of pizza is from the year 997 in a Latin contract from the town of Gaeta, south of Rome. A tenant owed the local bishop 12 pizzas every Christmas and 12 every Easter, rent partially payable in pizza, in the 10th century. Nobody knows exactly what those pizzas were, but they were valuable enough to write into a legal document. In 2023, archaeologists in Pompeii uncovered a 2,000-year-old fresco showing what looks suspiciously like a proto-pizza on a silver platter. Flatbread, toppings, maybe a pesto-like sauce. The researchers were very careful to say it wasn't technically pizza, because one thing was missing: the tomato. Here's the fact that surprises almost everyone. For most of pizza's existence, there was no tomato on it because there was no tomato in Europe at all. The tomato is American. It came back with the Spanish after they conquered the Aztec Empire in the 1520s, and Europe's reaction was not hunger. It was fear. The tomato is a member of the nightshade family, and Europeans knew nightshades as poison. Worse, when wealthy people ate tomatoes off their fashionable pewter plates, the acid in the fruit leached lead out of the metal, and some of them actually died. The tomato got a nickname, the poison apple. For roughly 200 years, respectable Europe treated it as a decorative plant. You grew it, you did not eat it. You know who didn't own pewter plates? The poor of Naples. By the 1700s, Naples was one of the largest cities in Europe, home to around 400,000 people, and a huge share of them were what the city called lazzaroni, day laborers, porters, the working poor, people who often had no kitchen and sometimes no fixed home. They lived outdoors, they worked outdoors, and they ate outdoors, fast and cheap. Street vendors sold flatbread by the slice, folded, wrapped in paper, priced for whatever coins you had. Garlic, lard, salt on the cheap end. Cheese and basil if you were flush. And at some point in the mid-1700s, somebody put the poison apple on the poor man's bread. Nobody died. It was delicious. And because the Lazzaroni had no reputation to protect, no dinner party standards to uphold, and no pewter, they adopted the tomato decades before polite Europe dared. The first true pizzas, tomato and all, were being sold on the streets of Naples by the 1760s, and dedicated pizzerias followed. Portalba, which started as a stand in 1738 and put in tables around 1830, still operates today and claims the title of the world's oldest pizzeria. And outsiders were horrified. In 1831, Samuel Morse, the man who would later invent the telegraph, visited Naples, looked at a pizza, and described it in his journal as a nauseating cake that looked like bread pulled out of a sewer. One of the great technical minds of the century, staring directly at the future of food and gagging. 12 years later, Alexandre Dumas came through Naples researching a book and took the opposite view. He cataloged the toppings, oil, lard, cheese, tomato, anchovies, and observed that the price of pizza in the market was the most honest measure of how the poor of Naples were doing that year. A gastronomic thermometer, he called it. Dumas understood something Morse didn't. This wasn't bad food. It was an economy you could eat. So the origin story is settled, right? Poor people's genius, street food, done. Not quite. Because the next chapter is about what happens when a product needs a better story than the truth. And this is where pizza history gets genuinely shady. In June 1889, Italy was a brand new country, unified for barely 28 years, and its royals had an image problem in the south. So King Umberto I and Queen Margherita visited Naples. According to the legend, the queen was tired of French haute cuisine and asked to try the local specialty. A pizzaiolo named Raffaele Esposito from the pizzeria Pietro e Basta Così, later Brandy, was summoned to cook for her. He made 3 pizzas. The one she loved carried tomato, mozzarella, and basil, red, white, and green, the Italian flag on bread. Esposito named it the Margherita. The royal household sent a thank you letter dated June 11, 1889, and a national dish was born. It's a perfect story. The people's food, blessed by a queen, wrapped in the flag. There's just one problem. The letter is probably fake. Food historians who've examined the document, most notably Zachary Nowak at Harvard, found that the handwriting doesn't match other letters from the royal household. The seal is wrong, and combinations of tomato, mozzarella, and basil show up in Neapolitan records decades before 1889. The pizzeria that owns the letter has, understandably, never been eager to submit it for full forensic analysis. What we're probably looking at is one of the great marketing coups of the 19th century. A small business inventing a royal endorsement, and an entire nation deciding the story was too good to check. And honestly, it worked so well that it's still working. Brandy still hangs the letter on its wall. Tourists still line up. But here's what I find genuinely fascinating. Naples didn't stop at one myth. Over the next century, the city built something much bigger, a monopoly on authenticity itself. Because Naples couldn't control pizza the way the Dutch once controlled nutmeg. You can't blockade a recipe. Flour, tomatoes, cheese, heat. Anyone on earth can make it. So the Neapolitans did the only thing you can do when your product is infinitely copyable. They made the definition scarce. In 1984, Neapolitan pizza makers founded the Associazione Verace Pizza Napoletana, an organization whose entire job is deciding what is and is not real pizza. The rules read like nuclear launch protocols. The dough may contain flour, water, salt, and yeast. Nothing else. The oven must be wood-fired and reach around 485 degrees Celsius. The pizza must bake for 60 to 90 seconds, no longer. Maximum diameter, 35 centimeters. Get certified and you can hang the seal. Deviate, and whatever you're selling, it is legally not Vera Pizza Napoletana. The ingredients got the same treatment. San Marzano tomatoes grown in volcanic soil near Vesuvius carry protected designation of origin status, and the consortium that guards them has estimated that up to 95% of the San Marzano tomatoes sold in the United States are counterfeit. Sit with that number. the pizza world has a fake luxury goods problem on the scale of handbags. Buffalo mozzarella from Campania has its own protected status, its own consortium, its own fraud scandals. And in December 2017, the campaign reached its final form. UNESCO added the art of the Neapolitan pizzaiuolo to its list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity, after a petition gathered around 2 million signatures. The food that Naples' elite once refused to touch is now protected by the United Nations, alongside sacred rituals and dying languages. That is how you defend a monopoly on something anyone can copy. You don't guard the product, you guard the story. There was just one thing the story couldn't survive: a boat ticket. Between 1880 and 1920, roughly 4 million Italians emigrated to the United States, most of them from the impoverished South, and they carried pizza with them the way you carry anything you can't afford to leave behind. In 1905, a grocer named Gennaro Lombardi got the first pizzeria license in America at 53.5 Spring Street in Manhattan. He sold pizza by weight, wrapped in paper and tied with string, and workers who couldn't afford a whole pie paid for whatever fraction they could. Sound familiar? It's the Lazzaroni economy, transplanted 7,000 kilometers west. For 40 years, pizza in America stayed an immigrant food, confined to Italian neighborhoods, largely invisible to everyone else. What changed everything was the largest people-moving event in history, World War II. Hundreds of thousands of American soldiers fought their way up the Italian peninsula from 1943 to 1945, and between battles, they ate what Italy ate. They came home with a memory attached to a craving. By the late 1940s, American papers were writing about this pizza thing as a trend. The dish had spent 40 years knocking. The war kicked the door open. And then America did the thing America does. It industrialized it. Act 1 of the Empire Wars starts in 1958 in Wichita, Kansas, when two brothers, Frank and Dan Carney, borrowed $600 from their mother to open a pizza restaurant. Their building's sign only had room for 9 characters. Pizza took 5. They had space for 3 more letters and went with Hut. That's it. That's the whole naming story behind what became the largest pizza chain on the planet. A $600 loan and a small sign. Act 2 starts in 1960 in Ypsilanti, Michigan, where Tom Monahan and his brother James bought a small pizzeria called Dominic's for $900, with $75 down. Within a year, James wanted out, so he traded his half of the company to Tom for the delivery car, a used Volkswagen Beetle. I need you to hold that trade in your head, half of the company that became Domino's for a used Beetle. When Tom Monahan sold his stake in 1998, it went for roughly $1 billion. James's half would have been worth about $500 million. The Beetle was worth a few $100. It may be the single worst trade in the history of American business, and the man who made it reportedly kept working for years as a mailman. Now watch the speed of what happened next, because this is the part that would have made a Neapolitan pizzaiolo's head explode. The Carney brothers franchised. By 1971, Pizza Hut was the biggest pizza chain in the world by both sales and store count. In 1977, PepsiCo bought it for around $300 million. 19 years from a $600 loan to $300 million. The Lazzaroni sold pizza for whatever coins a porter had in his pocket. Kansas sold it to a soda conglomerate. Domino's grew on a different insight. Pizza isn't a dish, it's a delivery system. In the 1980s, the company promised your pizza in 30 minutes, or it was free, and the promise worked brilliantly right up until the lawsuits. Drivers crashed. In 1993, a jury awarded $78 million to a woman injured by a Domino's driver, and the guarantee died within the month. It turns out you can't legally incentivize an army of teenagers to run red lights. Who knew? Meanwhile, a third front opened in the freezer aisle. In Minneapolis, Rose Totino, daughter of Italian immigrants, had been running a pizzeria with her husband since 1951. She cracked frozen pizza for the mass market, and in 1975, Pillsbury bought her company for around $20 million and made her its first female corporate vice president. Her crust technology got a U.S. patent. Pizza now existed in 3 separate economies at once: the artisan oven, the delivery box, and the supermarket freezer, each one worth billions. None of them asking Naples for permission. By the way, if you're finding this useful, or at least finding it absurd in a useful way, this is the moment to subscribe. This channel runs on stories exactly like a mailman who traded $500 million for a beetle, and there's a long list of them coming. Through the 1980s and 90s, the American chains fought each other with a ferocity usually reserved for actual wars. Pizza Hut and Domino's sued and countersued over ad claims. Little Caesars carpet-bombed television with its 2-for-1 Pizza Pizza campaign. Discounts got so deep that industry analysts openly wondered whether anyone was making money on the pizza itself, or whether the entire sector had become a customer acquisition knife fight with cheese on it. By the mid-90s, the three biggest chains were selling billions of dollars of pizza a year in a country where, 50 years earlier, the dish had been an ethnic curiosity you could only find near an Italian church. Act 3 is where pizza stops being food and becomes geopolitics. In September 1990, Pizza Hut opened in Moscow. Soviet citizens stood in line for hours in a collapsing economy to buy an American pizza, and the images went around the world. 14 months later, the Soviet Union didn't exist. Pizza didn't cause that, obviously, but the West understood the symbolism perfectly, which is why, in 1997, Pizza Hut pulled off the strangest casting decision in advertising history. It hired Mikhail Gorbachev. The last leader of the Soviet Union, the man who commanded tens of thousands of nuclear warheads, starred in a pizza commercial. In the ad, a Moscow family argues about his legacy. Because of him, chaos. Because of him, freedom. Because of him, they finally agree, we have Pizza Hut. The reported fee was around $1 million, which Gorbachev said he needed to fund his foundation. Whatever you think of the man, watch the ad once. It's 60 seconds of the entire 20th century compressed into a stuffed crust. And the military connection isn't a joke either. In Washington, a Domino's franchisee named Frank Meeks noticed that pizza deliveries to the Pentagon and CIA headquarters spiked the night before major operations. Deliveries doubled before the invasion of Panama in December 1989, and again on the eve of the Gulf War in January 1991. Analysts started calling it the Pizza Index. When the national security state works late, it orders pizza, and the pizza tells you something is about to happen. People were still tracking Pentagon pizza orders on the internet during the strikes on Iran in June 2025. The world's cheapest intelligence source is a delivery receipt. Act 4 is the strangest one, because the winner of the pizza wars turned out not to be a pizza company at all. By 2008, Domino's had a problem. Its pizza was bad, everyone knew it, and focus groups said the crust tasted like cardboard. So, in 2009, the company did something corporations essentially never do. It ran ads agreeing with the critics, word for word. Our pizza was bad. We're sorry. We rebuilt the recipe. Then it rebuilt something else, itself as a software company. Online ordering, GPS tracking of your driver, ordering by text, a loyalty machine running on data. Executives started saying out loud that Domino's was a tech company that happened to sell pizza. The market believed them. Domino's stock traded around $9 in early 2010. By 2021, it passed 500. Over that decade, Domino's shares outperformed Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook. The best-performing famous stock of the smartphone era, by some measures, was a pizza chain from Michigan. Think about that the next time someone tells you they missed out on tech. The empire went global and mutated in every market it touched. India's bestsellers run on paneer and tikka spices. Japan puts mayonnaise and squid on top and does not apologize. Sweden has a banana curry pizza that Swedes genuinely love. Brazil likes green peas. And the most controversial pizza on earth, the Hawaiian, with pineapple, was invented in 1962 by Sam Panopoulos, a Greek immigrant, in Chatham, Ontario, Canada. It is Canadian. It has nothing to do with Hawaii. In 2017, the president of Iceland joked he'd ban pineapple pizza if he could, and it briefly became an international diplomatic story because apparently that's the world we live in. So what broke? Where's the fall in this story? Here's the uncomfortable answer. The thing that collapsed was the very idea Naples spent a century building. Authenticity lost its pricing power. Once the conveyor gas oven replaced the wood fire, once Rose Totino's crust hit every freezer in America, once Little Caesars started handing over an entire hot pizza for $5 with no waiting, pizza completed its journey from sacred regional craft to pure commodity. The average American pizza today is assembled from industrial cheese blends, on dough that was frozen in a factory in about 4 minutes of labor. The Lazzaroni's food is once again the cheapest hot meal in the country. In a dark way, that's a homecoming. The next squeeze came from software. Delivery apps inserted themselves between pizzerias and customers and started taking commissions of up to 30%, which is more than the profit margin of most independent shops. Thousands of family pizzerias now effectively work for the apps. The pizzaiolo survived Queens, Wars, and Pillsbury, and then nearly got wiped out by a checkout button. And Naples? Naples responded the only way it could. It went luxury. Certified Neapolitan pizza is now a premium product in Tokyo, New York, and Dubai. Wood ovens shipped from Italy, certificates on the wall, $25 a pie. The food of people who couldn't afford plates is sold as a heritage experience. The monopoly on authenticity didn't die. It just moved up market, where all old monopolies go to retire. Look around, and this story is written all over the modern world, usually in places you'd never think to check. Anthropologists literally named a concept after it. The pizza effect, coined in 1970, describes what happens when a culture exports something humble, watches it transform abroad, and then re-imports the glamorous version as its own tradition. The name comes from pizza itself, because modern Italy re-embraced pizza partly after America made it famous. The margherita on the menu in Rome is, in a very real sense, a re-import. Economists have their own version. In New York, the price of a pizza slice and the price of a subway ride tracked each other so closely for decades that in 1980 the New York Times gave it a name, the pizza principle. When the slice goes up, the fare follows. It's held up embarrassingly well for a theory that started as a joke. The FBI has a version too. In the 1980s, prosecutors broke up a network that had moved an estimated $1.6 billion of heroin through ordinary American pizzerias, using flour orders and cheese deliveries as cover. The case is known forever as the Pizza Connection trial. Even organized crime looked at pizza and saw what everyone else saw: a business so ordinary, so universal, so boring that nobody would ever look twice. Even the calendar surrendered. Since 1984, October in the United States has officially been National Pizza Month, which sounds like a joke until you realize almost no other single dish has one. Americans eat around 350 slices per second. There are more pizzerias in the US than McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's locations combined. When politicians want to look relatable, they get photographed eating a slice, and when they eat it with a fork, as one New York mayor learned the hard way, it becomes a genuine scandal. A food can't get more embedded than that. It's in the etiquette rules now. That's the real legacy. Not the flags, not the certificates. Pizza won by becoming invisible. About 13% of Americans eat pizza on any given day. Around 5 billion pizzas are sold worldwide every year. A $150 billion industry that no one thinks about for even 1 second while participating in it. Which brings us back to a kitchen in Jacksonville, Florida, May 2010, and the most expensive meal in human history. Journalists have asked Laszlo Hanyecz many times whether he regrets spending a future $1 billion on 2 pizzas. He always says no. His logic is hard to argue with. On that day, bitcoins were worthless and he was hungry, and the trade made both things better. The pizza, he insists, was really good. 2 things collided in that kitchen. A brand new currency whose entire value was a story people were just beginning to believe, and a 260-year-old food whose value was a story people had believed so completely they'd forgotten it was a story at all. The new story won the headlines. The old one won the world. There's a version of that trade sitting in your kitchen right now, in the freezer, or in a box from last night, or folded into a paper napkin the way the Lazzaroni ate it 250 years ago. It survived poison scares, forged royal letters, 2 empires, a mailman's regret, and the Cold War. And it arrived at your door for the price of 30 minutes work. If this story earned it, subscribe, because there are more objects in your house with histories like this than you'd ever guess. The most valuable things in the world aren't locked in vaults. They're the ones that became so cheap, everyone stopped noticing they won.